This is the BioCentury Show.
The BioCentury Show is supported by the BioCentury Conference Series. Join BioCentury on the road to network, partner, and debate with peers across the biopharma innovation ecosystem. Our upcoming events span the globe and feature topics from translation to company building to deal making and investment. Visit biocenturyontheroad.com for more information.
As biopharma entered the new year, bankers and investors were weighing the bear and bull scenarios headed into 2025. Coming out of San Francisco's annual biotech kickoff meetings, the vibe was upbeat. But now, roughly 2 months into the year, the bear scenario, at least for biotech, is starting to feel a bit more tangible. Hello and welcome to the BioCentury Show. I'm Jeff Cranmer, Executive Editor here at BioCentury, and joining me today to discuss the environment for biotech investment, pharma M&A, as well as how PE is playing in the biotech space is BNP Paribas' Zahid Moneer, Senior Managing Director, Investment Banking, covering global healthcare. Zahid, who's based in London, has 20 years investment banking experience in healthcare, focused on M&A, capital raise, and the equity capital markets with more than $150 billion worth of deal value to date. He holds a PhD in pharmacology and MPhil in biochemistry and an executive MBA, all from Cambridge University. Zahid, welcome to the show.
Jeff, thank you for inviting me and delighted to be here.
Excellent. Well, Zahid, we have a lot to talk about. It's a tricky moment right now in biopharma. There's a lot facing the industry, from geopolitics to dashed hopes for significant interest rate cuts this year, not to mention the usual patent cliff concerns for big pharma. I'm curious, what are the discussions you are having with your clients right now as they navigate the complexity of the current moment?
Absolutely. It's a very, very exciting time in the pharma biotech industry. A lot of breakthroughs being made, a lot of technology coming to commercialization, a lot of pharma companies developing new products. So what are the big question marks that C-suite is focused on in the big pharma on this side of the pond and over your side of the pond? It seems to be a very, very consistent message. Message number one, build out your pipeline. So people are very focused, investors, shareholders want to see pharma doing their day job of bringing in innovative, high revenue generating products. So leveraging on the genomic revolution that we've just been going through, now being turbo boosted by AI, the pressure on pharma executives is really, how can we turbo boost the next generation of molecules from 2028 onwards? Where is that going to come from? And the question and the answers to a lot of that is, in addition to in-house R&D, we need to be collaborative, open, and working with the biotechs and the other innovative companies that are set up sort of independently. So that's one strand of what C-suite pharma is focused on. In parallel, shareholders have also asked big pharma companies to think about their strategy, where their focus is, and what's diverting them from this R&D pipeline focus. So we've then now seen big moves of pharma companies divesting of assets that they feel is non-core to the R&D pipeline. So we're seeing big consumer health businesses divested off, as you would have seen a few months ago. Haleon, the Sanofi consumer health business, Sandoz, the list goes on and on. Over the last 2-3 years, we're seeing huge divisions that used to be part of this conglomerate strategy of pharma being shedded away, and resources, personnel being sharply focused around creating value around pipeline. So that, to my mind, is where pharma is currently very focused over the next medium term.
Mm-hmm. Let's dig into the M&A a bit more. Where are you expecting deal activity to intensify for pharmas, given this need to hive off the non-core assets and dig a little more deeply into the innovative things to build out these pipelines?
Absolutely. So what we're seeing a lot, where BNP is involved in quite a bit as well, is assisting big pharma companies focusing on divesting their established products. So these will be products that are very good brand names, small molecules, have a very good reputation, and have gone post patent cliff, their LOE, but with very stable top line and with little promotion behind them. So those type of assets are now being divested of piecemeal by piecemeal. And there's a huge array of candidates or buyers for those particular portfolios whose models are around that and who can put promotion and so forth behind that, whilst having a partnership manufacturing supply agreement with the big pharma. In addition to that, big pharma will look to really drill out a lot of the small molecule focused manufacturing. So the sites that were really focused around antibiotics manufacturing, for example, or other small molecule assets, those type of assets are also being divested. Conversely, where there's monoclonal antibody or biologics manufacturing, where there's a cell and gene angle towards the CDMO, the manufacturing, that's where M&A is being quite acutely focused from a pharma's perspective.
Can you give some examples of that?
So we would have seen the publicly stated news around Lonza, of course, divesting off the consumer health or looking at solutions around the consumer health ingredients business. We're seeing companies now looking at taking private listed cell and gene therapy companies. So people are figuring out strategies for that. And really, we're seeing private equity owned cell and gene companies where a sale process was put on hold for the last 2-3 years because of the environment now coming to fruition. The cell and gene environment has really picked up, and we're seeing a lot more play happening over 2025. So that's where we see a lot of the activity looking to really materialize.
Excellent. I'm curious, from your seat, how price sensitive is pharma to M&A in this environment? Are they really, this is more turning toward like the therapeutics company type of deals. Is pharma price sensitive in this environment where biotechs are really struggling, or are they really just looking for good assets?
I think they are looking for good assets, and we've heard again and again that they are willing to pay quite high premiums for assets, especially biotech assets that have been de-risked. So the original strategy was wait for the molecule, the product to get through phase 1, phase 2, reach phase 3 on license, and then pay whatever needs to be paid to secure that asset. Of course, you have valuation points at each of those milestones. So as you're going up from phase 1 into phase 2 and then entering into your phase 3 and getting interim data, the valuation inflection of that asset will increase quite significantly. But pharma were traditionally happy to wait for those molecules to reach that sort of phase 3, early phase 3 before making a play. What they found now is that as the intensity to acquire these pipeline assets has increased significant fold, and they're competing against their peers for these type of assets, they've had to come in much, much earlier into the clinical development life cycle of these biotechs and make their bids and their play a lot earlier. So, we're seeing approaches being made at phase 2, phase 1, and so forth, especially around the oncology, immunology, these type of therapeutic areas, which have been, the core of some of the large cap pharma top line growth drivers. These areas have been critical in some of the approaches and the M&A activity being made. So the shift has been big pharma moving towards much earlier stage biotechs, having that relationship with them either through a licensing agreement or buying them outright if they really believe in the underlying platform.
Mm-hmm. Are there any deals in particular that really epitomize this moving earlier that you've been watching, or that you see as sort of being maybe a model for other pharmas as they approach the space?
Yeah, so there's quite a lot of activity going on. I would say some of the key ones have been around oncology platforms that have been within the PARP1 space. People have been looking at those type of platforms, those type of companies, and trying to make bids for them. In addition, one of the key mechanisms of actions that people have been looking within oncology, again, people have been looking at radioligand or radio-labeled monoclonal antibodies. We obviously saw what I think was one of the best deals when Sanofi acquired Ablinks, the truncated version of a monoclonal antibody, which also has the ability then to be loaded up with radioisotopes, so almost delivering a warhead with a nuclear, delivering a missile with a nuclear warhead on your cancer target. Those type of approaches have been at the sort of forefront of a lot of the M&A activity. So now, of course, with the evolution of and the way our ability to analyze genomics, identify the right sites and targets for biotech, and the ability to develop these sort of focused monoclonal antibodies, and then you've got, like I mentioned, these different versions, truncated version of monoclonal antibodies that can be targeting them. That's where the battle is between the big pharma companies to really integrate those type of assets.
You mentioned earlier AI. Of course, you can't have one of these conversations without digging into AI. Where do you see pharma AI fitting in terms of the deal making that's happening right now in pharma?
So when I'm speaking to senior executives at large cap pharma and their R&D colleagues, the key here is that the human genome was cloned sort of back in the year 2000, took about $1 billion, and took over 10 years, and now that can be done in a much shorter period and a much cheaper price. But the question has always remained: how do we interpret this sort of genomic sequence in a therapeutic context? That now, with AI analysis of looking at what sequences are involved in the proteins that are regulating the particular pathophysiology pathway and designing your therapeutics on that, has just turbo boosted the way people think about R&D. It's sort of cut your R&D time to market something, to do the research, and have confidence that this could actually probably reach the market significant fold. So it's been an absolute game changer within the industry, and it's really hit home over the last year to 15 months that AI is really going to make a huge impact. So that's what we're seeing. And now with that tool, the question becomes, once you've identified the right sequences, designing the right therapeutic molecule, biologic, etc., to then capitalize and make sure you're being able to treat that particular pathophysiology that's been identified.
Excellent. I think that's a great place for a quick break, and then we will come back and we'll discuss PE's evolving role in biotech deals, as well as the biotech financing environment.
For 3 decades, BioCentury has helped biopharma executives and investors make business-critical decisions and build larger networks with peers across the biopharma innovation ecosystem. Our goals are simple: gather the right people in the room to partner, network, and debate critical issues facing the biotech industry. BioCentury's upcoming events span the globe and feature topics from translation to company building to deal making and investment. We hope to see you on the road at an upcoming BioCentury event. Visit biocenturyontheroad.com for more information and to register.
We're back on the BioCentury Show with BNP Paribas Zahid Moneer, and we're going to talk a little PE right now. This month kicked off with something of an unusual deal, a private equity buyout that will separate Mitsubishi Tanabe from its longtime parent, and the deal will put the financial strength of Bain Capital behind this centuries-old Japanese pharma. So, Zahid, I'd love to get your take on this deal and in general what PE's maybe evolving role is in the biopharma acquisition market.
Yes, absolutely. And this was a bit of a landmark deal. It really re-underlined PE's new shift towards pharma. They can see the growth of the industry and now a more de-risked view around assets around that. So Mitsubishi's business, the pharma business, very stable, a very strong brand name. So really ticks all the boxes from a PE perspective on the stability of the cash flows, the margins, and so forth. So it made sense that Bain entered into acquired that asset, and there's a lot to do with that. So as any PE, you'll be wanting to think about your exit. What are the next steps that you're going to be taking? And so when you've got an underlying stable platform like Mitsubishi's, there are then a multiple number of things where you can add growth drivers to that. Turbo boosting potentially the business with some more development products within that therapeutic area, working on different formulations, a whole host of things that PE can then further deploy dry capital within that asset to further drive growth and then prepare it for the next exit. So a real watershed moment. And in general, if you look across the landscape around PE's play within biopharma and sort of biotech or CDMO manufacturing, there's been a lot more activity sort of going on. Synthon, for example, was recently acquired by Goldman Sachs Asset Management. And again, these were highly sought after assets with lots of people spending time doing due diligence and looking to acquire this. And the underlying reasons, of course, is that the manufacturing of complex molecules within the industry is only going to increase. So the resources and customers, big pharma customers requiring complex molecules, and again, outsourcing the manufacturing, which links into my earlier point, that's not what pharma wants to focus on. They want to focus on the R&D. The manufacturing, the CDMO part of this is generally something that will be outsourced. And so PEs have seen this as a great opportunity to lock into this play and provide that complex manufacturing. So, we saw not so long ago also BC Partners exit Pharmafin at a quite a reasonable multiple, I believe, over 20 times. And, we're seeing a lot more of these assets coming to market and being hotly contested. Likewise, when we look more broadly in the pharma space, PEs had generally played more in the sort of generics. Again, going back to our early point, stable cash flows, not much competition and stable margins. But And case examples there would be things like Doc Generici within Italy, Nurex Farm, and so forth. But what people have recently started to focus on is to really turbo boost that organic growth story by inducing this with growth elements, so bringing in innovative molecules. Briumvi, a great example of how Nurex Farm has transformed the business into a really attractive CNS-focused spec pharma company coming from its historical generics basis. So that type of model, we're seeing more and more of PEs getting a foothold on a nice generics or a stable pharma platform, and then turbo boosting the organic growth story.
That's excellent. What other types of deals or companies do you see maybe private equity starting to target more often in the life sciences?
Certainly within the diagnostic space, we're seeing quite a bit of activity there. There's big assets within France focused on electrophoresis, blood diagnostics. So these type of assets will all have very good margins, stable cash flows, and aren't open to huge amount of competition. So they would have very strong brand names as well. So those type of assets, Sebia, for example, would be a great example of a highly sought after, high margin, great cash flow generative business being sought after by private equity. So I expect to see more activity and more processes involving the life sciences within the life sciences diagnostic space sort of coming to fruition.
Excellent. Let's turn to biotech now. That's sort of the bread and butter here at BioCentury. When we recently spoke, you mentioned a great deal of pent-up demand in the biotech space. You mentioned just seeing a lot of deal flow. Obviously, it's been a tough few years, tougher in some territories than others. What are you seeing now?
Yeah, so it's been a really, really exciting time. So since the San Francisco conference and discussions I've had over 2025, it's been an unprecedented range of enthusiasm for biotech on both sides. So by that I mean biotech investors looking to deploy capital, which had been held back over the last sort of 2-3 years as the environment from their perspective wasn't conducive, to today where they're really looking to deploy capital. And on the other side, you've got biotechs that hadn't really started processes looking to open up. They're doing capital raises right across the range, from seed investments, round Series A, B, C, from ticket sizes of $1 million up to 15, 20 million, rounds of up to sort of 100, 150 million. So this has been absolutely turbo boosted since 2025. So I see that continuing through 2025, and probably we will see that in conjunction with M&A activity. So we'll see big pharma playing in there, and in parallel we'll see the capital raise approach also being taken.
Has there sort of been a tipping point for this vast increase in activity that you've been seeing? I mean, obviously, we'd been expecting interest rates to kind of come down more than it looks like they will at this point. The China bear market's dragging on. I know a lot of biotechs are still restructuring, still trying to figure out how to tap into that capital. What do you see kind of changing here?
And Jeff, I think this links into our earlier part of the conversation with pharma, strategic pharma playing and making acquisitions at earlier stages of the life cycle of the biotechs. We're seeing investors now wanting to now participate in the earlier clinical development stages with a view to exiting at, say, phase 2 of clinical development to a pharma company, or going to the IPO, etc. So I think it's been partly triggered by the much more aggressive nature of pharma to acquire biotechs, and hence investors looking to deploy capital into those biotechs to ride on that wave. But also, in general, we're seeing great technologies coming to market. So, a couple of examples that I've got in mind. A great asset, Move On, which has come out of Zurich University, skeletal regenerative platform, providing probably the first ever treatment for women's stress urinary incontinence. Again, this is a hugely unmet need, a huge amount of problems with the current standard treatment of slings and meshes. So this biotech has taken this issue, the current treatment problem, really come up with this innovative and in terms of efficacy and safety, a real solution to this problem, and has had fascinating data up to a phase 2 stage, and have had inbounds. That's a typical example of what we're seeing now of companies doing that. And on the other side, people have talked about, we talked a little bit about the R&D process and how that's been truncated with AI. We're seeing companies like Phaser Bio in Scotland, where they've got a transgenic mouse model, a humanized transgenic mouse model with a cytochrome P450 gene, which allows pharma companies to test their drugs, etc., at a preclinical stage and get data which is equivalent to what you would get in a human. So again, truncating and de-risking the huge clinical development process for pharma. So that's been a huge success, and again, as expected, people knocking on the door from both the biotech investor perspective and then on the sort of strategic investing. So those type of people that are addressing either underlying therapeutic areas which have an unmet need, or addressing a problem that pharma faces, or improving the processes for pharma, are having huge investor inbounds and sort of attraction. And then the final example I want to give, which is actually quite an interesting one, is Huia Bio, which was an asset set up by Sir Dennis Gillings and Lady Mireille Gillings. And this is a biotech where they've got proprietary access to IP in China. They've really accessed hundreds of different molecules. They'll have a way of analyzing what are the best ones to approach, select, and then taking that out and then developing that into the clinical studies. So a really innovative approach where they're analyzing these hundreds of different molecules, which one's got the most potential in terms of efficacy, safety, address the underlying problem, and then taking that through to sort of commercialization, clinical development and commercialization. A fantastic model that's really, again, unlocked another way of getting lab science into the commercials. So that's some examples, plenty more, of course, of where people are spending time and quite a lot of money.
Indeed. Well, Zahid, we could go on for another hour, but I'm afraid we're out of time. It's been a real pleasure getting your insights. And I'd like to thank our listeners for tuning in to the BioCentury Show.
The BioCentury Show is supported by the BioCentury Conference Series. Join BioCentury on the road to network, partner, and debate with peers across the biopharma innovation ecosystem. Our upcoming events span the globe and feature topics from translation to company building to deal making and investment. Visit biocenturyontheroad.com for more information.